You're listening to Seattle Real Estate Podcast.
Hey everybody, I'm Sean Reynolds from Summit Properties Northwest, Reynolds & Klein Appraisal, and your host of this episode of the Seattle Real Estate Podcast. This is a podcast on a super important SBA update that happened yesterday, Small Business Administration update that happened yesterday. And if you took a Paycheck Protection Program loan, you will want to hear this. So what the SBA did is they basically said if your loan, which will become a grant if you follow the guidelines, if your loan was under $2 million, we're basically not going to investigate you too hard on whether you needed that. Now, what had happened, and this is in the SBA's frequently asked question number 46. Now, what happened, and this is on the CARES Act, PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program. And so a lot of these acronyms, if you haven't been following, it's because you probably didn't get a loan, you didn't need one, you're not a small business, whatever. But if you work for a small business, you might have talked to your company owner about this and you're trying to get clarification. And I had this conversation with Jim Scott, Summit Properties Northwest broker, a few days ago. And the question was, if we take this money and we get audited and we can't prove that we actually didn't need it or we couldn't borrow from somewhere else, or if we had assets, that was a frequently asked question that came up with the SBA, I think question number 31 last week. So this stuff is all ongoing and it's rotating through super quick. But the frequently asked question that was released yesterday basically said, if your loan is under $2 million, you are in a safe harbor. And there's two main reasons why the SBA made this clarification. And that was that they want to provide some economic certainty to small businesses who are trying to reopen. And they're like, oh, we need this money, but hey, here on frequently asked question number 31 or 37, it was something like that. It tells you how many updates they're doing as this goes, because as businesses reach out and say, hey, what about this? Then the SBA is updating, as is the government on all this stuff, because it's such a moving target. You don't really know what it is. So the target, the frequently asked question that we had, I think it was last week, was, oh my gosh, if you take an SBA loan, the PPP loan, and if you have assets, if you have the ability to borrow, and I think there was one other criteria, you may not be eligible for forgiveness on this loan. So what happens is, and if you're not familiar with the PPP, is if after 8 weeks, if you can prove that you've spent 75% of the loan on payroll and rent and, payroll, rent, utilities, and interest payments. Those are the four criteria you can spend it on. If you spend 75% of that, then you'll basically get this loan forgiven. It'll be a grant. Hey, you're good to go. And so what the SBA yesterday said is if your loan's under $2 million, you guys are going to be okay. So the SBA is basically saying to conserve its finite audit resources and focus its reviews on larger loans where the compliance effort may yield higher returns. So bigger loans, they're going after bigger loans. And all of this came about from a whole bunch of public outcry on the fact that publicly traded companies that have access to credit markets, that have access to funds like small business, like Summit Properties Northwest and Reynolds & Klein Appraisal, we don't have the ability to go to a capital market and do some corporate bond, just get some basic financing as a publicly traded company. I am 100% shareholder of both, corporations. I have to go to a bank and basically get my loans there if I want to, if I need additional funds to run or keep my business going. And that's the whole point of this SBA loan, is that to keep these businesses going and basically provide some liquidity for small business. And so they've deemed under $2 million to be the threshold. So that seems reasonable to me. Now, if you're a small business and you took a loan for over $2 million, you might have to go through an audit process and be able to prove that you actually did need the money. And I think that's okay. What they're really saying is, what the SBA is really saying is, we're going to go after the big boys. Now, who are the big boys? You've heard of like Harvard Business School or Harvard the college needing to, Harvard University, I think it is, not college, needing to, they return their money. Who else got these business loans? Well, Ruth Chris Steakhouse is one of the original ones. Shake Shack, Auto Nation got one for $77 million. Ruth Hospitality Group, they got one for $20 million. Shake Shack got one for $10 million. Potbelly Corporation got one for $10 million. Let's see who else I recognize here. Legacy Housing Corporation, $6.5 million. Harvard Bioscience got one for 6.1, but that's a NASDAQ traded company. Drive Shack, Fiesta Restaurant Group got for $5 million loans. So these companies got some pretty massive SBA loans because they did qualify with under 500 employees. They met the requirements, they took the loans, but what the SBA is saying, hey, you guys can get money from somewhere else. This was really meant for truly small businesses that don't have access to outside capital. So either you guys take that money and you figure it out, but if you can't prove that you had the ability to, if you didn't have the ability to borrow money elsewhere, this might be a loan instead of a grant. You might actually have to pay it back. And I think a lot of companies are still going to take that loan because it's a 1% interest rate loan. That's as close to free money as you're going to get. Now, do you want to take on more debt during a downturn? If you're a small company, but you took over $2 million and you probably had access to capital elsewhere, you still might take it because that's as good a loan as it's going to get. And that's what the SBA, that's the whole point of this program. In a lot of circumstances before this pandemic, in order to get an SBA loan, you had to prove that you couldn't get a loan elsewhere. You had to basically prove that you've been denied, through regular banks and that kind of thing. And that's why the SBA is there. Small Business Administration is known for being difficult to get a loan, but that's because they are not a lender of last resort, but they really hone in on small business. They're going to put you through the ringer to get a loan. But in the case of the PPP, they're kind of like, all right, you need to just certify that you're going to be impacted by the coronavirus and the shutdown in your local area. So you basically just have to sign a certification and go through the process. So I've gone through the process. Here's a quick update on what that process looks like. So is real estate going to be impacted by the coronavirus? Yeah, my sales are way down. I mean, fall off the chart just drops off incredibly. On the Reynolds and Klein side, we've seen a slowdown for sure, but we're still going. So is this impacting both of my two businesses? Yeah, absolutely. You bet. We're just now starting to see kind of a little bit of a comeback with our Summit Properties Northwest. We haven't had a drop in pricing on homes, but the number of sales are way down, and that's to be expected. Nobody's really wanted to go out. So my update is on April 3rd, I applied for a PPP loan, and actually it was April 4th. April 3rd is when you could start. That's the first day. That was a Friday that you could apply as a small business. I was able to get my information together on the Saturday. So I applied fully on Saturday. I applied through Lendio because my guy Darian Dunstan said, hey, you saw a thing on CNBC. Let's go with that. I've talked about that with other podcasts. And I've been very happy. I was very happy with Lendio. Mackenzie from Lendio, you were great. Big thumbs up. Appreciate your help. She gave me text updates throughout the process. And I never screamed for money. I never kind of reached out, hey, how are things going? Because I felt like through Lendio and Ready Capital is who Lendio initially set me up with to get the loan. I felt like through the updates, I didn't really need to reach out. I wasn't being forgotten. And that's a lot of what I think other small business owners have been lacking is any kind of update. You're put on this list where you don't even know if you've applied for the loan. And so with Lendio, I got a text from Mackenzie. It was awesome. And I'm like, okay, I at least know I'm in the queue. And so that was April the 4th. And then throughout the process, I think about maybe 2 weeks ago, maybe it was 10 days ago. I should have documented all the dates, but you don't really care about that. You just care, hey, did I get the loan? And yes, the answer is I got the low six-figure loan that could be a grant if I spend it wisely, if I follow the PPP. I got that as of yesterday. Funds hit the account. So had to do the payroll application twice, because some of the criteria changed from when I initially sent in all the paperwork. And it was basically a 2-page online process. And for me and for one of my companies that I applied through, I had to basically send in the 941 form, which is what itemizes on my IRS tax returns my payroll. And so that provided the basis for this loan, and you get a loan for 2.5 times the amount of payroll. And now you have to spend basically 75% of this on payroll in the next 8 weeks. So I've got through, I think it's July, sometime. Haven't figured out the exact criteria there, but I've got basically 2 months to spend that on payroll and rent. My rent isn't very high. I've always been super frugal on rent. Basically have everybody work remotely from both my companies with the exception of a couple of media guys. And so my rent isn't too high. My payroll is a big component. I've got a bunch of people working for me, and so I'm going to be able to use that. Utilities, I don't even have like a phone here in the office. Everybody uses cell phones. So I've got internet. That'll be about my only utility. Everything else is included in my small rent amount. So hopefully I'll be able to qualify and get the loan qualified as a grant. But that happened as of yesterday. And about, I think 10 days ago, I received my, from Lendio, I received my SBA authorization number, loan number, whatever. And at that point in time, I knew, okay, you're in the system for good. They're going to lend. And then they basically said, hey, we got to lend to you in 10 days. That didn't happen. It took, I think, maybe 14 or 15 days, somewhere in that range. But it was pretty close to what I was told. And I'd also been following, oh my gosh, the first round of the financing for SBA loans just got eaten up just super quick. And we knew that was going to happen. There's so many companies out there. And part of the big uproar was Ruth Chris Steakhouse and Steak Shack, or Shake Shack. They were the ones taking up all the money. And were they? No, but they did take some pretty big loans out, as I just kind of read to you. And should they have? And that's the question. And that is the SBA update. Question number 46 is, if you have a loan under $2 million, don't sweat it. And that's kind of, I saw, and the reason I was able to see this is I follow JJ the CPA on YouTube. And we've been following here, I point up here on our TV screen, follow him pretty religiously. Now that guy has pumped out some content. He has put out a video for like every small circumstance. And I think he's had just amazing content throughout this whole process. He's obviously a very skilled YouTuber. He knows his stuff. And for a CPA, I think he's pretty darn funny. Check out some YouTubers. It's funny to say, don't contact your CPA, but contact a CPA that's on YouTube. And the reason is he gets hit up with all kinds of questions. He's really got to have his stuff down versus some other CPA stuck in an office that has no connection to the internet or no connection to social media. They've just got their sphere is maybe just their clients. And if their clients aren't real sophisticated, they're not going to be asking questions like, hey, what you're telling me is wrong. And I've actually had that with some of my business owner friends. We've talked it through and I'm like, man, your CPA is flat wrong. That is not a situation that they are advising you correctly on. Been through that with friends. And it's like, how I'm a frigging real estate appraiser and a managing broker. How can I be interpreting this so wildly different than a certified public accountant who should know what they're doing? It's because all this stuff kind of came out in massive blasts and everybody's kind of analyzing how this stuff goes based on their own experience. And as a small business owner, a lot of this stuff hasn't made sense. So last week when we had frequently asked question number 31 or whatever it was from the SBA saying, hey, if you have additional funds to draw down to get you through this, you might not get this money granted to you. You might need to return the money. And so all of us small business owners are like, whoa, that's not good advice. You're kind of giving us the money and then taking it back. Well, now they've given us the money back again. So this is kind of a big deal for a lot of small business. And I think you're going to see more and more loans funded this way. So my entire process took from April the 4th through yesterday, which was May the 13th. So what is that? 5 weeks? That's, a little over 5 weeks. That's not bad. That's pretty good. For the United States government to actually pull this off, I think that's a hallelujah. Now, I know a lot of small businesses have not received their funds, and there is a lot of stuff out there where they're saying go to a small credit union in your area, because the big boys like Bank of America and Wells Fargo, they had difficulty, and they were basically turning people down and saying, you know what, if you want to check in with another lender, you might want to do that. They're basically turning business away because they had so much in their pipeline that they couldn't handle it. So don't be afraid to check out Lendio.com, somebody you haven't been aware of. I had never heard of Lendio. We did a little bit of research, still couldn't find a lot out, but we worked it, and it came through for us. So Lendio set us up with Ready Capital, and Ready Capital is actually our servicer, we believe. So they're the interim. So SBA funds through, actually the SBA is funding this loan through Knight Capital. I have it written down somewhere, but Knight Capital was our eventual lender. They actually lent the money, and Ready Capital is a servicer. So all these little companies that are acting within this whole loan process, and the loan is guaranteed from the SBA. And this is a massive process. So I think in order to get this amount of money out to small businesses, it's actually been a pretty good success story. A lot of the news that you heard early on was, oh my gosh, nobody's going to get loans. Only the big businesses are going to get them. But I think it's being handled in a way that companies who do need the money are getting the money. Maybe it's going to take you a little bit longer. Maybe your situation is on paper harder to prove to the SBA. Mine was pretty straightforward. I uploaded a bunch of 941 forms. It's like, hey, those are for my taxes. Here you go. And that was just, the way my thing went. So it was whatever my average monthly payroll was times 2.5 times was the amount of loan that I got that will become hopefully a grant. So that is kind of where we sit with that. The bottom line, if you're under $2 million on a PPP, you're probably in good shape. If you're over that, you're probably a bigger business and you understand kind of the situation you're in. But check out JJ the CPA and Lendio Capital. Thanks so much for getting it done for us. Lendio Capital, Knight Capital, actually Lendio Lending, I think it was, Ready Capital. All this stuff is just, I don't know. It's crazy how this has all gone down. But, for me, I'm a 2 thumbs up on the program. So for those of you that are still out there, hang in there. I believe you will get funded. You just got to keep at it. And when your lender asks you for information, Johnny on the spot hustle and get that information back to them, because otherwise there's literally millions of people behind you waiting for loans who, when they're asked for their information, they're going to get it back, and you got to just jump on that. So, and that's what I did. I just followed the instructions, followed the rules. And like Sunday morning, I woke up and, hey, we need this, this, and this from you. And so I provided that. I had to provide a voided check, and I had to certify, I had to e-sign the note on the loan. That was on Sunday morning, and then funding happened yesterday, which was Wednesday, May the 12th. So about a 3-day funding deal for me. So the PPP loans are getting worked through the system. Might take a while, but hang in there if you're a small business and you haven't got it. So hopefully you have benefited from kind of what I'm telling you. I'm just giving you my experience and also giving you a quick update on the SBA question number 46, which in this case was positive for small business in America. So if you're watching this on YouTube, love to have you subscribe to our channel. We're a real estate channel, but we cover a lot of economic topics, and we are doing daily podcasts through the shutdown, through the pandemic. So tune in again. If you're listening to us on our podcast platforms out there, thank you so much for listening. Really appreciate it. So again, I'm Sean Reynolds from Summer Properties Northwest, Reynolds & Klein Appraisal. Appreciate you tuning in. We'll catch you in the next one. Bye. forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you'll know when our next video is out.